Hi everyone, I'm super excited to host Nuno, Chief Software Architect, and Mo, CEO at Podium. Thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thanks, Mayur, for having
Thanks for
us.
having us, Mayur.
Okay, so tell us a bit about your background, like from your teenage days to till this date. What would be your career highlights? We'll start with Mo.
So for me, it's just property, property, property. I've always sort of liked property development. My dad did it as I was growing up, and I was fortunate enough straight out of university to get a job with a really large Australian property developer called Lendlease, where I spent the last 17 years of my career. And I guess the great thing about that is the highlights are basically every single project I've worked on, right? Because while you work on it, it's hard, but then at the end of it, you can kind of walk and see and touch and feel what you've been a part of. And I've actually worked in different parts of the world as well. So, like, I've done projects in Melbourne, Sydney, Singapore, and KL. And because it was a large property developer, a lot of their projects were large urban redevelopments and are quite like iconic buildings in the city. So, like if you go to Singapore where we work at the moment, I'm actually fortunate enough to be working in the building that I was on as a development manager. So yeah, so I would say that that's a little bit of a background for me. So anything to do with property development, I've sort of had that sort of experience, whether it was from the investment side, in construction side, the development side, the finance side. So, yeah, just lived and breathed property development.
Okay, for me, it's a bit different because I only joined the industry 4 or 5 years ago. So the background is computer science. I'm passionate about innovation and startup. That's actually what brought me to Singapore. But I was in other industries, healthcare, telcos, and moving to this industry was actually quite exciting because it seemed to be a bit old school still. So the fact that I really like digitizing stuff and bringing innovation to different places really made it an interesting move. I think what excites me is really just innovation, bringing digital teams together, and understanding what are the customers and users' problems. That's what's the most interesting thing for me. As most career on putting buildings together, so the kind of architecture is a bit a different one. Usually people call me a fake architect because I don't build buildings, I build software. But yeah, that's a bit of my background and my career.
Like sometimes when people search architect, depending on the geography in Silicon Valley, they assume it's a software architect, but they're like, okay, it's a building architect. So
Yeah, and because we intend to talk to a lot of like developers, I keep on saying, "Oh yeah, Nuno is our chief architect," and I have to go actually software
So
architect because they would just go straight to a design architect, right? So
who would be a mentor or a coach you would like to give a shout out to?
so many. So in our business, like when I was in Lendlease, I guess all of a few development directors. So David Hutton, Richard Payne, these two in particular. I think the shout out for me is because well, for me at least, they prioritized the development because they knew it was going to be a place where people were going to live and breathe in. And so I guess a lot of the time you can kind of think about it from like a numbers perspective and how much money you're going to make. But I think legacy is a really important thing because these buildings sort of last 30, 40, 50 years. So, there's a lot of intentional thought that goes behind every single thing that we used to do on our developments. And uh, the, these two development directors in particular really pushed like the vision, trying to get the outcomes. So that would be my shout out at least. And I think the last one would probably be Bill Rue, although he's a director on our company, so maybe he thinks I'm doing it for lip service. But he started our whole digital journey in Lendlease, right? He came in as our CEO for digital. So I guess in a way he's kind of forged the path where myself and Nuno are like on at the moment. So I don't know for you, Nuno, who that
I
is.
could give shout outs that would be a bit more technical shout outs or even like people that kind of shaped a bit my career. But I think maybe the shout out that I would give, it's more about for people that is not from the industry and joins the industry. It's actually a very complex industry to join because it's not a common sense sort of industry. So for me, coming from healthcare, I could put myself on the feet of patients, understanding what are their pain points. But when I join an industry that is like so complex, I joined the industry and I don't know how to put myself on the shoes of a property developer because they need to consider so much stuff that you don't even need to think about or you don't think about in your daily lives, right? So for me, the shout out is more like the people from the industry that I end up meeting that actually helped me understand more and more about what challenges exist, because that's the only way to make, or that's it, to help me make the product successful. My knowledge from a technical point of view wouldn't be enough without having that knowledge from the industry. So the shout out actually goes for the people I met in Menlease and in Podium that actually help make this possible.
And Nuno, can you elaborate on like from coming from computer science and building solutions in this industry? If you were to learn right now about the industry knowledge and build tools, for also people listening who are from computer science background and wants to build tools, how would you design the playbook to learn and build?
So I think what is super complex about the industry is the amount of stakeholders that are involved in putting the building up or the project up, right? And the amount of data that is behind every single stage of designing a project, right? It's really, really complex, right? Technically, what would be super important is understanding how that data comes together. What are the different layers that need to be considered? The relationships between the different parts of the different stages that the project goes through, right? So there is a lot about data structures, a lot about how can you make your experience performant, because there is so much that you need to surface, 3D geometries that you need to consider when you are doing modeling. So there is a huge component on data. And sometimes even if you don't consider 3D and the geometry, there is the whole analytics that you need to do on top of it, right? So in the end, it's all about the data. You can do super complex stuff very early in the process. You can do super complex stuff at the end when you have a digital twin that you want to manage your building. So for the tech people and for the geeks, that it will always be about how that data can be managed effectively, efficiently, and how you interact with the data, right? You need to have very robust APIs. You need to have very performant front ends to be able to display and navigate through the models. So it's a mix, right? But in the end, it's all about how you are able to structure your data properly.
Abstraction and translation.
Yes. Yeah.
Mo, can you walk us through the product story, how it works, and what inspired?
What inspired Podium?
Yes.
So in Lendlease, I guess we started this project maybe 7-8 years ago, where we had this idea that every project shouldn't start on a blank page, right? Because essentially on every project that we do, we kind of like start from a blank page. We go through the project and then we learn all these lessons and we do lessons learned, and then we go to the new project and it basically is the same thing again. And so we were doing things like our blueprints, like, this would be 60 to 70% of what you need to do if you're doing a residential development, as an example. So we already had baked the idea of like taking something that is effectively like a framework and doing it the next development, but we wanted to digitize it. And so we looked towards basically other industries that had digitized, because we are very acutely aware that our building industry is like one of the slowest, least productive industries in the world. And so this project was sort of happening in Lendlease, and I was on a development in Malaysia, a shopping center. And then how the two got married together was I was opening the shopping center, and it was just during COVID. And one of the biggest challenges I was having is part of managing the development was also trying to get it leased. And all of the tenants, or some of the tenants, used to kind of look in the ceiling, and they would always sort of talk about issues around some of the services and stuff like that, right? And it goes back to design. It went back to like how it was designed and how it was coordinated. And that came out of the lessons learned. And so at the end of this project, I heard about what this digital team was sort of trying to work on. And I put my hand up to basically join it, because I felt like knowledge was fresh in my head and I really was kind of passionate wanting to change how we do things. And I guess while we were fortunate enough, and this is something I tell people, like a lot of startups that start with basically very little, they have an advantage in terms of they really kind of like think of outside the box and how to succeed. But then we had the other benefit, which was there was an enterprise backing us, there was funds, so we had the opportunity to try it and test it out in a property developer on different projects. So we kind of worked out really quickly what works and what doesn't. And that's kind of invaluable, because a lot of the things that we end up doing in the beginning was like we failed miserably, but it wasn't a failure because we kind of learnt what not to do. And then essentially after about a few years, we kind of landed into what now is the thesis of our product, Podium. We knew we kind of had a winner because we had worked on two really large developers, and we did like a little POC with them, and it was successful. And I guess we started the journey to basically spin it out and be independent. And that process took us about a year and a bit because it was complicated. It was in the enterprise. We had to take out all the IP. We had to go and find funding. We had to like make sure like we can kind of encourage people like Nuno and talent, which is essentially like the most important thing I think for a startup to kind of come on this sort of journey with us. So that's kind of the background. But the simple idea is still the same, which is how you don't have to start every project on a blank piece of paper. How do you kind of capture basically all of this design knowledge that is out there for any type of typology, and how can you basically automate it using computational design and agentic AI? And that's the basis of Podium.
It sounds very exciting. If I were to ask from the user or adopter's perspective, what kind of typology and what's the right time to think about considering using Podium?
I would say right at the start. So right when you are, we're a platform, so we want people to start from the beginning, and aspirationally, we want it to be right at the end, right? We want them to be in Podium. So the first product that we launched actually was the feasibility product, because we followed the normal sequence of a development, right? So you originate, you sort of find your opportunity, you win the opportunity, you convert that opportunity, which means that you kind of get it ready for tender. You find your builder. Your builder is selected, and they deliver it, and then it obviously goes into operations. So the first kind of stepping stone into Podium is about feasibility, right? So it's how do developers really rapidly assess sites with greater certainty than ever before. And that's really been the selling point for us, because a lot of what we would have been used to as developers when we sort of make an assessment on site, which is very limited, it's very high level, because obviously it costs you money to do a detailed cost plan, it costs you money to do a detailed design, it costs you money to get a detailed analysis from a sustainability perspective. So usually you only spend that money when you know you've won the project and now you're about to deliver it. But with Podium, you get a lot of that upfront certainty that was just never available before. You can do it right at the start, and with using our feasibility tool.
Right. And you also have other project conversion.
So maybe you want to talk about like project conversion in terms of, from a tech perspective, how we've achieved that.
So I think what's important in terms of differentiating one from the other, right, is that typically when you do feasibility, or in typical workflows, you do feasibility, you do your massing studies, but then when you actually go to conversion, you kind of start from scratch. You're almost gonna design again the whole architecture layer and the MEP layer and the structural layer. And then you bring maybe 3 models together. You need to go and federate them together into one. Clash detection needs to happen because they were built in maybe different tools, right? And that consumes a ton of time when you are actually preparing to convert what was your initial studies into a project that you want to now start to actually prepare for the delivery at some point in time, right? So the premise behind what we do in project conversion is actually what you used and what you did on your feasibility. It's already to a level that you can transition that to schematic level of detail and detailed design inside Podium as well. And you can actually even achieve that without maybe considering the conversion, right? Because if you try to do the schematic level that we have in terms of automation, you're actually going to have a lot of certainty up front that maybe going to allow you to define better which kind of project you actually want to convert, right? So technically, what we actually are doing is go beyond the massing, because we are using already the property developers blueprint or product book, as it's usually called, which is their typical layout in terms of if they are residential property developer, for example. And we are automating the entire structure and the services layer or MEP layer together with that space. So what you end up having on project conversion is actually one model that is already clash free because we automated the 3 domains together. And you save a lot of time, of course, on clash detection, but you also save time on the optioneering, because the fact that you are automating all the 3 layers together, you can maybe try, okay, I want to try this building in precast concrete or in steel or in timber, and compare the outcomes and actually define early in the process what might be the engineering part of your building that you want to define earlier on, right? So technically, it's really about automating as much as possible the different domains in a building, and having that early in the process. Also, I didn't mention cost and schedule, but that also comes together with it. In the end, what is behind all of this? It's data, right? That's why I was actually earlier saying data is the key here. We are actually producing a ton of data in different data layers from different domains in one single model, right? So that's what project conversion is about. You can then pick a Podium model, maybe export it to Revit. We have a Revit plugin that you can export to, right? So building those workflows, but trying to compress stuff inside Podium with a lot of automation is really our focus on a project conversion.
That sounds such
And I
a
was just
complex project.
I wanted to just to take a step back because we went straight into the product, but I wanted to say, like, what we are doing in Podium is essentially basically trying to resolve. There's 3 key things that we are trying to do, right? One is the design or conversion process takes 8 to 12 months or longer. So it's a really long process before you start building. The second thing is you work with different stakeholders. So you start with the developer, then you work with the designer, then the contractor, and the supplier. But each one of those stakeholders actually have a massive impact on the design and ultimately the delivery of the project. And the third problem is that you're making a huge bet, I would say, in the start where you're buying the land, as an example, which sometimes is 25%. In Singapore, where we are, it's 60 to 70%. With not really knowing that the law can change and the outcome can change, right? But so those 3 problems we are solving, we're trying to solve it. It's not a new way we're trying to solve it. I think, like, if you look at papers in the past, they kind of said the same thing, right? Which is collaboration. So we're a platform that allows people to collaborate. And the second thing is because we are a platform, we've allowed the supplier and the contractor and the designer to come right up front. And we've codified a lot of their knowledge into the platform. So we've used that automation to really compress the design times. The design goes down. So we got rid of silos. We got the design time came down. And because of the data that Nuno was talking about, that certainty that you would have gotten at the start has increased tremendously. And so you can now place more risk-free bets, if you would like to call it that. And that's essentially what Podium is doing for property developers.
And Nuno, what would be the most technically challenging feature to develop?
So as I guess you understood, the technical part of the product is quite complex. The automation that is happening across different domains means that you can actually have a domain impacting another domain, and that domain needs to react and provide the feedback to another domain saying, I reacted, now you need to react back. So there is almost a feedback loop that is happening between different systems in the building, and the other systems might or might not react, right? So you can think about this as being a highly complex computation engine behind the scenes, where a lot of these automations are playing together in order to reach final model, right? So this computation engine is really like the behind Podium, and it's where every single piece of automation is running, and every single piece of automation, it's producing data, right? What happens with that data? Then it can be tenfold. You can display 3D geometry. You can maybe display floor plate layouts. You can display maybe the cost plan, the financial assessment. Like, there is a ton of ways to then slice and dice this data. But to reach the richness of this data, that's where the complexity of all those algorithms put together, it's really I would say the most challenging thing that we have to manage internally.
Looking back, what would you do differently more?
What would I do differently? Look, I told you before, like I consider every mistake we made like a very valuable lesson. There's not much I can say we can do differently because I know hindsight is 2020, and yes, we made a mistake, but I think it's part of that startup process that I've appreciated, like learning very quickly and pivoting. I think that one of the things that I wish if we had, at least in the start, was I do wish that we were probably a little bit smaller. Like we didn't come out of enterprise. That's my best reflection because I'm fortunate enough to, at least in Singapore, it's like an innovation sandbox. I spend a lot of time with other sort of startups and founders. And I do feel that because they they started off really small, they were a little bit more grittier. And so in hindsight, like one of the things I talk to our people that we work with, like it can be a little cushy, like it can be a little bit cushy, but we shouldn't rest on our laurels, right? So I guess that's probably the only thing I can think of right now. But otherwise, everything else, I feel like it's a valuable lesson that we've gone through. I don't know if you've got one.
I actually maybe think I never reflected too much on that. We are always so busy building
with like looking forward.
Going ahead, I think maybe as Mo was saying, we started with a fairly decent team in terms of numbers straight away because we came from an enterprise. And when that happens, you tend to maybe like try to parallelize a lot of different directions because you have the resources to do so as well. Even from an engineering point of view, I'm talking about building product. You can build more because you have more people. And because you have more people, you're going to parallelize a lot of streams and say, oh, let's try different streams. Whether if you are, let's say, a startup where you are like 5 people, you probably going to focus all in one thing and try to do only one thing, right? The fact that we parallelize helped us on building more a platform vision and not as much like a single point solution product vision, which has its pros and its cons, right? But initially, maybe we spent time on things that we end up not pursuing because we had that extra resources to consume, and we could do so, right? So those resources, if they would have been maybe doing stuff that it was more targeted, maybe the product would be even more advanced than what it is right now. You never know, right? But yeah, that's something that maybe I would say it could have been different, but not that it was a bad thing. It was still learnings, I guess, for us, because now we know that maybe some of the things we try, we won't pursue anymore.
And for founders and CTO listening to this, Mo, what would be your piece of advice on hiring and building customers? And Nuno, your piece of advice to CTOs and building tools and software setup and planning?
When in the early days, I look for energy, I look for passion. And even if they don't have all of the relevant experience, I'll take that because I think as you grow, then you supplement. So having a passion for what we do and the problem we're solving, and just really being excited by it, like that to me is invaluable because you're going to ask every person in our team, including myself and Nuno, wear multiple hats, right? So we're happy to like jump in, and even if it's a sales thing or whatever it is, I will do it. And then the second part I think was about customers. And I think with customers, it's just when you are a startup, like every single customer is gold. It's like, you have to be so grateful for them because we're at that stage where the people who are working with us are the innovators and they're taking a chance on us. And that to me is like, especially because they're large developers, they're massive enterprises, the developments cost billions or millions of dollars, right? It's a huge thing to gamble with. So the fact that they're willing to sort of give us a chance to work with them is so precious to us. For me, it's about making sure that we value that and that we make sure we keep true with what we told them we were going to do. And I mean, that's been the feedback to a lot of our customers that we work with. The reason why they are working with us is because part of it is the product, but there's also part of it is they kind of value our team's work ethic and how much time we put in and work with them.
For me, it was the CTOs, right? From a startup point of view, I think the industry right now has a lot of cool stuff showing up. I think it's benefiting from, of course, the AI boom and being able to produce a lot of cool stuff that sometimes it's cool, but is it ready for production? Probably not, but it looks cool when you play around with it. So what I feel is that the industry, it's huge, and as I already said, it's complex. So you can actually find very niche use cases that you can build a really good solution, and probably going to be successful if you do it well, right? What I feel it's actually very important is technically the team that you need to find, having some knowledge of the industry actually helps. So in some industries, sometimes you can hire a full-on tech team that doesn't know at all the industry. But in this one, I think if they already have the background, it's going to be helpful, because they won't come as like blind into a tricky and complex solution. So yeah, it's a mix of like right resources, which I think is true for every industry, but specifically for this one, I guess find a niche and try to fix that niche, because the industry is so big that probably you're gonna still be able to find some success, even if it's a small product.
Amazing. I have a rapid fire round, and you have only 5 seconds to answer it, and you can't answer in more than like 10 or 20 words. So just to make it easy, with Nuno might get a bit more advantage. You have to answer it first, and then Nuno in the sequence.
Okay.
Okay. So what's your favorite restaurant?
Nando's.
Oh,
I don't know if
think
you get that. I don't know if you know that, but it's a Portuguese chicken place.
I think this is a pun because I'm Portuguese and I don't think Nando's is Portuguese.
But Nando's is from South Africa, and I'm from South Africa, so that's why I said Nando's.
My favorite restaurant is my mom and dad's house. That's where I get the best food.
A city which is in your travel bucket list.
Right now, San Francisco, just because we work with a lot of people in that valley and had so many stories. So I would love to go and visit it.
I would not say a city. I would say a country, Kyrgyzstan. I'm very curious about that part of the world.
A book which made a big impact in your life.
The Alchemist. I don't know if you've read it, but it's just basically a really great metaphor for life. I was very fortunate to read it when I was really young, and I've kept the lessons with me till now.
And for me, I would say that's a tricky one. I don't want to go too techy because then it is just like it's meaningful. There is I don't know. Actually, I don't know the name in English, but there is a Portuguese book which is you can try to translate it after. Ensaios sobre a Cegueira, which is from a Nobel Prize winner, Portuguese Nobel Prize winner, and it's super well written. It's fantasy, but it's super impressive on how someone with blindness would take over the world, kind of thing. So yeah, you can look for it.
Your favorite movie?
My favorite movie.
I can say.
Gattaca?
Okay.
Here you go.
Mine is Inception.
Oh, that was also good. But I don't know. Did you watch Gattaca before? No. I've watched it. Gattaca is like it's quite an old movie, but if you get a chance to watch it, it's actually now really, really relevant because one of the concepts about it was creating a perfect human being, right? By manipulating like the embryo. And what does that actually do to society? So
your role model?
Gosh, that's a hard one. I don't really have a role model, to be honest. I mean, I admire a lot of people, but I just think that every person has a good quality that you can always kind of learn from.
Role models also. I think it's more like the right values for me, and for me it's all about values and the values that I grew up with that I try to apply throughout my life. I mean, role models in the end, it's whoever contributed, I think, to my growth, and that can be actually family, can be friends, can be colleagues. So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
3 words. Mo would describe Nuno, and Nuno would describe Mo.
Attention to detail.
What? 3 words.
Yeah, it is. He's exceptionally good at detail. So yeah, attention to detail.
I would say Mo is, I think the word that comes to my mind is always passionate. Okay. I think he's also very, how do you say, English is not my first language. So I always struggle to put adjectives on things and people. But I will leave you with passionate and sensitive to others. Is that the right?
Empathy?
Maybe? Empathy to others? Maybe not. I don't know if it's empathy. I think it's more like he cares about how others are feeling. So I don't know.
Sensitive,
sensitive to others. I think that's like the right way to put it.
Okay.
or empathy. Empathy? I don't know. I try to explain
I'll
it.
take
We
that,
got
Nuno.
the
I think
point.
I'll take that. Those are beautiful. I'll pay you later.
Okay. Lastly, an advice you would give to your 18-year-old self.
I can go first. And an advice I would have given is to consider exploring the world earlier. So, I mean, I moved out of Portugal when I was 26, and I feel that it only brought me positive things. So, even if I would have moved at the same time, just the consideration of doing it earlier, it would have been, I would say, a beneficial thing. And I think it's very enriching for whoever can do that, to try and do that if it has the means for it, because it's being exposed to other cultures. I think it's very, very, very important from a personal point of view and also from a professional point of view.
I think mine is just take more chances, because my dad's an entrepreneur, and he kind of always said, like, what's the worst that can happen? And for the few chances that I took, and Podium is actually one of them, it's when I've experienced the most growth personally and professionally. So that would be probably my advice to my 18-year-old self.
This has been a insightful and fun part. Thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you, Mayur.
Mayur,
Appreciate it.